Hey guys, it's Jim Bounds with Motorhome Rehab Ranch on Patreon. Ranch hands, pulling a motor. Why do you pull a motor? And how do you do it? And how do you recover? You know, back when I was in high school, my buddy had a 340 Duster. My parents bought me a Pinto station wagon. What can I tell you? But my buddy had a 340 Duster. And we pulled that motor out so many times, we lost the motor mount bolts, and I don't think it ever ran again after we messed with it. That's how I learned how to mess with these things. You can learn from messing up. We messed that thing up pretty good. Well, the one thing about a GMC, the motor is right in the middle of the thing. I mean, you know, you don't pull the hood and get a 12-pack and bunch of guys sitting around in the hood, on the fenders. It doesn't work that way. It's in the bowels of that motorhome. You used to be able to yank a motor out, 4 or 5 hours, flip it over, do something, throw it back in, take a run. Brother, there's some people out there, and you'll hear it the minute this video's over. Oh, well, I can do the motorhome, I can get it out of there, I can do it. Dude, it's not how fast you get it out and get it back in. It's how well you do it. And when this sucker's 50 years old, everything is rusted, grease covered, nasty, goop and pucky. My uncle, everything's covered with goop and pucky. All the bolts are rusted together. And half of them are missing because Bubba before didn't even put it in. So it's more of a forensic type of thing on one of these things. And it's not, well, let's pull it out and see what happens. Put it back in and see what happens. No. You don't want to do this twice. We were charging 30 hours to R&R, a motor and a transmission. That's to take it out and to put it in. That's not the radiator, that's not this, that's just to get those two big hunks on the ground and get the two big hunks back up in there. And if I made a mistake in between there, dude, that's another 30 hours labor to get it out and put it back in. One of the most important tools we had at the co-op was the Mercedes. Because I could take a drivetrain, the transmission and the engine, and maybe 4 hours, just like the old days, just drop it in there and go take a run, see if it works or not. If it didn't, or there's a problem, you could sit down on the tire and work on it. It was so important. Before that, I had a frame from a '66 Tornado. So we put the motor in the frame and fire it up on the ground. That's called the redneck lullaby. Listen to a big block on the ground. That was good, but I couldn't check the transmissions, and you couldn't really run it up to temperature and load it down or anything like that. So the Mercedes was a big deal. Well, you're not going to go out and cut the back end off of a car just to test out your motorhome, and I understand that. So you need to take great care, and I really would find a way to fire that mother up on the ground before you go put it in, okay? Because you only want to do this one time. You're not doing this for the weekend warrior, you're going to change an intake or whatever. That sucker's in there, man. You want to put it in once, you want to put it in right, put it in complete, and then go drive, because it's not a hot rod. It's not a weekend warrior thing. This is a motorhome. It's supposed to go somewhere. It's supposed to use it. You're supposed to shut the hood. You put gas and oil in it, and it's supposed to take you places. Yeah, it's a hot rod. Yeah, it's a 455. Binford and all that. But it's a big machine. It's a big motor to pull a big machine. Okay. All right. So you got to take the motor out. It was doing fine, and then it was always that way. Everything was doing great, it was running super, and then, it all runs great until it stops. So don't feel bad about that. You say, what happened? Listen, dude, it's 50 years old. What happened? Age happened. Like Forrest Gump said, it happens, right? If it hasn't been pulled out already, it's time. The timing chain goes out, the original single roller chain goes out about 70,000 miles, be stretched. Single best thing you can do is to rebuild the motor, or to at least put a timing chain in it. And if you've gone down that far and it's got low compression, well, it's time to do the whole motor. Because again, it's age. It may only have 40 or 50,000 miles on it, but the rings, they lost their spring. You know, the gaskets are starting to leak. And I tell you, if your oil pan gasket starts leaking, the only way to change the oil pan is to lift the motor. And the only way to lift the motor is to take the transmission out. Well, you've already done 80% of taking the whole daggone motor out. So you just do it, all right? Our rear main seal is a rope seal. Yes, it's got 2 pieces of rope on the rear main, the crank on the rear main. And sitting for a long time, the rope dries out. You know, when we rebuild them, we put a 460 Ford rear main. There's a rubber seal. Fits exactly. I don't know if Ford and GM thought about that, but if you're going to rebuild it, you want to get rid of the rope seal. That would come with the rebuild gasket. Just, you know, wrap your fish in it and use a Ford 460 main. But if the main seal starts to leak because it shrank, the only way to fix that is to drop the oil pan. The only way to do that is to pull the motor. So that's going to be a reason to do it. Okay. If you warp a head, in other words, if you blow a gasket, blow a head gasket. Normally, you know, Bubba will say, "Well, let's just put a head gasket in there. We'll do the head work." If you got a new motor and you blow a head gasket and you do a valve job and you do a head job and you put it together, you got a fair chance of it working, 50-50. But if it's an old engine and it blows a head gasket, everything's got warped, and the bearings and the rings and everything is closer to the end of their envelope. And if you put heads on that thing, you're just waiting for the inevitable, okay? It's just going to happen because the bottom's old. You change the top, bottom's going to blow out, okay? Now, like I said, if it's a fresh motor and you just did something stupid, didn't put oil in it or something, you could maybe get away with a head job. But I would not do a head job on one of these motorhomes. If you've got a motor issue, right then is when to do the whole thing. When I say the whole thing, it's not just the motor. Because remember, the motor's been connected to the transmission. That transmission's got the same amount of torque and heat cycles and everything that motor's got. And unless you know, I mean you know the age and the condition of that transmission, if it's been rebuilt or unless you know. Because remember this, the R&R is so expensive that it's not worth putting a rebuilt transmission in it that you don't know, or an engine that came out of something else. It takes the same amount of labor to do the whole thing. It's much more effective if you have everything done right then. You turned all the clocks back on your drivetrain. And then the money you spend that labor, or if you're going to do it yourself, the Band-Aids that you're going to put on yourself and all the stuff, make it worth it. Bite the bullet and do the whole thing. Because you know that it's all right. You won't have to take it out. It would be terrible. You do this motor, and you know, you talk to people, oh, we can get the motor without taking out the transmission and all this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You get the motor out and you do some stuff to it, you know, you put it in, you go down the road, and it won't go to third gear. Oh! Now you got to pull the transmission out. And in between that, something happens and somebody drops a screw down in the motor or something. You put the training on and boom, the motor blows up. No one's happy. So this is a big investment. It's a big vehicle. It's an old vehicle. And it's a big investment. This is not a Saturday night special here. So do the whole motor. Let's do it all. Okay? I just got to tell you. All right. So you say pull the motor. Well, let's go over there and pull that out. There's several ways to do it, and you've probably seen several of them. One pulls the motor out the inside, runs it down a rail to the door and out the door. That's a lot of grease inside the motorhome. That's a lot of rags. A lot of things can go wrong there. Plus, the transmission's still in there. So you're going to rebuild, remember that thing I told you? You're going to rebuild this engine, you're going to do all this stuff to it, you're going to put it in, transmission's going to be messed up. Spend the labor to do them both, get them both on the ground at the same time, and you can address both of them. You spent the labor, okay? Now you can do that from the top. If you can't jack it up, you're in a place. I had a guy once, he's in the middle of a cow pasture. And he had to take the motor and the transmission out. And he looked at all the stuff about going inside and all that stuff. He dug a hole under the motorhome. And he did it from underneath in the hole. Yeah. So in other words, I'm going to tell you to do it from underneath the coach. Take it out the bottom. The motorhome's going to stay a lot cleaner. Say, oh God, how do I do that? The trick. Get the transmission pan 38 inches. Write that down, ranch hands. Get the transmission pan 38 inches off the ground. Okay? How do I do that? Start jacking it up, just like the video on jacking it up. Get up, then go a little bit higher, and a little bit higher, and a little bit higher. Your jack stands will get it up. Those big jack stands will go up high enough. Get it up 38 inches. Eagle has landed. You can live in it while you're working on it, you know? And the way it works, build a rack. I'm going to show you, we'll go over here and show you the rack in a second. You put a rack inside. You're going to pull the motor up, lift it up, suspend it off the motor mounts. There's two transmission mounts. There's one front motor mount. You're going to lift it up. You're going to suspend it up. You're going to go up underneath with either a transmission jack or a floor jack, disconnect the transmission, drop it down, take it out. Then you're going to take the motor and go back 90, you're going to go back where the transmission was. The reason you got to do that, there's a cross member under the motor. You can't go down. That's the main structure. I saw a guy want to cut that. It's crazy. Take the motor, go back where the transmission was, you turn it 90 degrees and you go down. Sounds simple, doesn't it? No, we're going to go through it more. That's the cloud picture. We're going to go through each step. I've got a guy right now up in New York. He's pulling his out. And we're going through this. This is the reason I'm doing this. I was going through all this with him and I said, well, shoot, I ought to do this video. Everybody will want this. Where he's at right now, it's on the ground, so we got to catch up. So the decision is to pull the motor, okay? The decision is to do it right or do it wrong. It's okay. May work. You know, you're tossing the dice. You don't know. Shoot, we build a motor, everything's fresh, brand new. Take it home, the main bearing spun. Don't know. The machinist did everything he could do. The builder did everything they could do. Old motors. I don't know what it is, but old motors just seem to just have a whole big set of problems that other motors, you know, you can build a production engine, you know, Jasper or something. Jasper built engines for me for 4 years, and we both had to fire each other the same day because they did not run in a motor. They did a dry run where they hook it up to an electric motor and run it and get the pressure up and everything moving, you know, nothing's thrown out. And they said, we're good to go. Our initial failures on non-run-in motors was so high. This is like 5%. It was terrible. So they had to eat those. And I found that that was just unacceptable. So we went back taking our motors and building them ourselves. We used Drew Koba. You look him up, K-O-B-A. Drew was a contributing editor to Joe Mondello's reference book. He was our builder. If you want a really well-built Oldsmobile engine, it's going to take a while. It's going to take a while, but he can do a good job. But production engines just did not seem to stay together. You know, engine needs to be balanced. Production engine's not balanced. If somebody says, well, high performance engine, high RPM engine needs to be balanced because it's got high revs and it'll throw apart. Well, the problem is on a low RPM torque motor that's creating torque at low RPM, it'll beat the bearings out if it's not balanced, okay? So you have to pay attention to those details. So when you get this motor out, it's not going to be a fact, well, let's find another 455 somewhere and let's just throw that thing in there. I'm telling you, the motor has to be a custom motor. The custom doesn't mean it's made to go to the racetrack and it's chrome plated. Custom means that it's made for a specific application. And our application is running on regular gas, low RPM, highest torque possible at those low RPMs. That's a unique motor. Machinist, it took almost a year to get Drew in the right parameters to where he was, because he's building engines for high RPM, putting in Gliptol and relieving bumps and intakes and all this. We don't want any of that stuff. Highest performance engine, yes, but that's not our performance engine. Our performance engine needs a whole lot of different things, okay? All right, so we're going to get this thing up in the air, all right? Going to get it 38 inches off the ground, transmission pan 38 inches off the ground. Now, this is something I learned after 20 years of grease rags, having grease all over my face, having to wear special clothes just to mess with these things. No. Here's how you do it. Get it up in the air. Get the wheel liners out, okay? Take the carburetor off. Put duct tape over it. Put the carburetor in a box, because if we're going to keep running a carburetor, we're going to be sending it to somebody special. I'll give you that later. Put it in a box, put tape over that thing. Don't take anything else off the engine. Because remember, everything's going to be taken apart, right? So we need the grease. We need to de-ass the grease off of that whole thing, off the whole compartment. It needs to be cleaned out, okay? So we need to clean it out without getting grease on the inside of the motorhome. Real important, okay? Here's how you do it. Get 2 cans of Dow oven cleaner. Yeah, Dow oven cleaner. Don't get the stuff on you because it stings, okay? First, go underneath the motorhome in the wheel wells and douse the motor, transmission, frame, firewall. Turn it in, say it's an oven. It's a greasy oven. Both sides of it. Cover it. Have a pressure washer. Give it 20, 30 minutes and pressure wash the bejesus out of it. Don't worry about getting water in anything, because remember, it's all going to come apart. Worry about getting the grease off of it, off of everything. I mean, make it as clean as you can get it. Everything, the firewall, everything. Both sides of the engine, okay? Now you say, well, there's still grease on the top. You're right. This is the trick. Go get a 55-gallon trash bag. Spray the top of the engine with the Dow oven cleaner. Get your pressure washer. Put the trash bag over the motor. Cut a little hole in the top of the trash bag. And get your pressure washer in there and blow it. Blow it off. Okay? That's to keep the grease from blowing up at you and up in your motorhome. Okay? Blow the top of the engine off. It won't be as much because you've already done as much as you can possibly get from the sides and the engine covers on it. You may even want to put a piece of plastic in and put your engine cover down, maybe. But you're going to be blowing water up, all up in there, all up in there. Then you're going to do the top of the motor. Blow it all off. Get it as clean as you can, okay? It's going to save you a lot of rags, your wife yelling at you, getting grease on everything. It's just an important thing to do. All right. Next thing you're going to do, you get the carburetor off. Take off the fan, cut the fan belts, because you're going to put new fan belts on it anyway. If you're not going to put a serpentine system on it, why would you do that? Well, fan belts have worked for 50 years. They work good, and if you're okay with it, then that's fine. I'm running fan belt. Okay. If you're building this for the future, you're building it to go somewhere, you may want to consider a serpentine belt system. Because why? Because the belts don't come off. Every one of your new engines have serpentine belt systems. Besides, it's really pretty. But you want to put this thing back in there and have the least amount of trouble, lowest amount of maintenance possible. So when you put it back in there, consider these things, okay? I have on my belt system, I have a double pulley on the alternator because I have a big alternator, okay? But those are things we'll worry about later. Take all that stuff off the front of the motor. Get it all out of the way. Get the fan out of the way, the fan belts, air conditioner that's sticking on the side over there. Take the alternator off, all the brackets. Get the engine as small as you can, because remember, it's got to come out. Get it as small as you can. If you have a new car, a newer car, scares me to ever work on one of the new cars. There's so many wires and things. Jeez, I've had nightmares on trying to figure out where all the wires go back. That's one of the nice things about these. There's not that many wires. I mean, you can figure it out pretty easy. But, you may want to label some wires to help you out when you go put it back together. So break the motor down. Now it's clean now. Theoretically, you're not going to get too dirty. And like I said, when you're pressure washing it, now if you were just going to pressure wash it, clean it off, and fire it up, that's one thing. But we can drown that sucker because we're going to take it apart. So you can get it clean, clean, clean. Okay? All right. So you've got it up in the air. You got it broken down. You've got it clean. Now we're going to put the bracket on the top. All right? Now, the bracket, we'll show you a picture of it in a second. The bracket is there to do two things. One, it lifts the motor up, and then it helps you slide it back. Because remember, you can't go straight down. In cars, you go straight up, but you can't go straight down because there's a cross member. Well, same thing in these motorhomes. There's a cross member right between the two wheels. That's the structural strength of the front end. Like I said, I had a guy cut that thing once and drop the motor down. Welded it back together. Whew. Boy, that's scary. Had another guy pull it out from the front one time. Kind of like diver down. Now that is how you do a RevCon. You take the grill off. On a RevCon, you got to take the front end of the motorhome off. Scary. You pull all that stuff apart, and then you pull the engine out, and then you go back in there like a miner and you pull the transmission out. It's kind of scary. I'd rather go down with it. I did 2 of those, and my guys, I promised them we'd never do one again. About 5 years ago, we went to GMC's only because it just got to be so crazy trying to know how to pull out so many, like an Airstream. Pulling an engine and an Airstream out is just really pretty stupid too. But they go out the front. But to do all of those things, that's when about 5 years ago, we just got to the point only GMCs and only out the bottom and only this way because it was just too much liability, too many things to remember, too many things to forget. Okay? All right, so look, come on over here. Let me show you what this rack looks like, and then we'll finish some parting words, okay? Come on. Okay, guys, here's the stand. It's a 3-piece stand. I think there's a picture of this in the service manual. This is a piece, that's a piece, this sits on top. And this slides. This is how you get the motor back to where the transmission was, okay? All right, well look, this has gone a little bit long today. I just wanted to get you really into it. If you're going to do this, further episodes will tell you more to do. Ranch hands will have the information about carburetors and serpentines and all that stuff in our weekly letter. All right. Well, look, thank you for your time. If you're going to do the engine, you can do it yourself. You just got to take your time. You know, don't get in a hurry, but do it all. Right. Well, look, again, thanks for your time. Click, like, and share. And we appreciate everything. If you'd like to be a ranch hand, go check all that stuff out and tell people about us. I'm doing ranch news every couple of days, so make sure you go over to Patreon and take a look at that. And give me some more comments. We'll see you next time.